Hello everyone, welcome to Indian Economy by Aman Soni. In today's news hour, we shall be discussing the important articles related to economy from the Hindu newspaper. In the editorial page, there is no news related to economy today. We'll go to text and context. This article talks about the startups in India. There was a research paper published in the Dublin City University in Ireland, which shows which studied the India's entrepreneurial policy and related to startups in India and what are the challenges that the Indian startup sector is facing currently. And how the startup policy by the government of India, that is the Startup India, Stand Up India policy, and other various schemes for promoting startups in India benefited, and what are the challenges it is still facing. The Startup India scheme was introduced in 2016 to increase the sustainable growth and to create large scale employment opportunities in the country and to provide an ecosystem wherein the new businesses could grow in the country. And now currently almost 65,000 of startups are registered on the portal run by the government, of which 40 of the companies attained unicorn status in the last 12 months. For a startup, it is called unicorn when the valuation exceeds $1 billion. If a startup's valuation exceeds $1 billion, it is called a unicorn startup. And the total unicorns currently now in India are almost 90. And because of the increase in so many startups, India is currently ranked as third in the global startup ecosystem. The startup policy helped in addressing the regional disparities. This was done through networking, training, and providing mentoring facilities to the rural youth. And the entrepreneurial outreach was happening in the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. And that way, the regional disparities between the various regions could be addressed. Government also facilitated the network between venture capitalists and the funds, the angel investors, banks, incubators, universities, consultants. So basically, the government got everyone together who are all related to the startup ecosystem so that there will be seamless connectivity. And because of the policy of the central government, many states also started adopting a policy for themselves. Before the launch of the Startup India policy, only few states had a dedicated startup policy. Just 4 states had the startup policy. Now, after the launch of the startup policy, currently as many as 23 states and UTs have a dedicated startup policy for themselves. But again, there are few issues here. And what are the issues when it comes to the startups in India? The startups are heavily concentrated only in few mega cities, namely Mumbai, Bengaluru, Delhi, etc. Until very recently, till last year, Bangalore was the startup capital of India. Now the economic survey said that the number of startups in Delhi is more than the startups in Bangalore. So Delhi replaced the place of Bengaluru. And because the startups ecosystem is closely situated in few of the cities, even the fundraising and the financials related to the startup ecosystem, that is the venture capitalists, even they are situated in the following cities. The data shows that as much as 93% of the venture capitalists are situated in these financial cities itself. If you can see the graph here, it shows how the startups are majorly occurring in few states, for example in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Delhi and UP. In 2019, the Reserve Bank of India conducted a Indian startup sector survey, pilot survey, which shows that more than 3/4 of the startups that are coming up in India, they are clustered only in few of the states, that is Karnataka, Maharashtra, Telangana, Delhi and Tamil Nadu. If you observe here, these are the states which are already performing very well when it comes to the industrial performance too. Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and when it comes to the ease of doing business, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh would always be in the top. So the startups are coming in India, but the problem is they are getting focused and concentrated only in few states. This will lead to regional disparities because when we have a startup, it would provide employment opportunities to the people. When there is employment opportunity in a particular sector, if an industry is created in a sector, there would be hubs created around it. There would be all entertainment and demand for leisure increases. If an industrial hub comes there, the supermarket increases, movie theaters comes up, schools comes up, educational institutions come up, hospitals come up. So because of the focus of the industrial sector, because of a industrial unit at one place, the area around that place would get developed. And now if the startups are coming only in few areas, only these areas will get developed and the other states would remain backward. And when it comes to the inclusive development, the research shows that in the whole 40-page Startup India Action Plan, there are no mention about the vulnerable communities and additional benefits that are given to them. So the article says if we have to have inclusive development and to bridge the divide between rural and urban areas, we have to give additional benefits to the vulnerable section. The government data also shows that the vulnerable section are mainly the ownership in the agricultural establishment as compared to the non-agricultural establishment. They majorly own farming, livestock, fisheries, and that too in the rural areas. Again, the data shows that these are mainly self-managed and they don't hire any workers to operate. So what does that imply? It implies the scale of that is very small. If you are managing something by yourself and you don't need some workers to manage it, that means the scale of it is very less. Where only when it is in huge scale, you need more and more people to work in that. And this also implies that these are the necessity based jobs and they don't create significant job opportunities because necessity based subsistence entrepreneurship is where these are informally run and the people are self-employed. We just discussed on how they don't employ workers because the size of the business is very small. And what can be done here? We need to use technology and drive through the innovation. We need to drive the agricultural establishment into the even the non-agricultural businesses. Also, the research looked into the number of women in the startup ecosystem. Of the 62,000 startups registered under the DPIIT, 46% of them had at least one woman director. And the RBI's pilot survey on startups shows that only 6% of the startups had a female founder in comparison to almost 55% of the male founders. But in the remaining 38%, there was both male and female co-founders. The government is taking various measures to improve the number of women in the business. So they are given additional benefits. Various benefits are given to increase the women entrepreneurship. And what are those benefits? 10% of the funds of SIDBI has been reserved for women-led startups. And even SIDBI will mandate the banks and others who are giving loans to the startups that 20% of the businesses, the loans have to be given to those businesses which are women led, which are women influenced, or which employ women or who are women consumer centric. And various capacity building programs are taken, various awareness programs are taken so that the number of women in business would increase. There is a dedicated web page for the women on the portal. Currently, when DPIIT allocates funds to the SIDBI will in turn give the money to the alternate investment fund. The alternate investment funds would raise from the market the same level of matching funds and then they would invest the amount into the businesses. This is done because the government doesn't want to be told that it is doing some favoritism. So the government directly doesn't allocate. The SIDBI gives the funds to the alternate investment funds. The alternate investment funds would raise some part of the money from the market, then they would competitively invest into the businesses which are in need of the money. In the business page, today the news is just about oil here. We have all clearly discussed about the oil impacts and what the impact it would have on the Indian rupee, Indian imports, the inflation in India, and what the RBI is going to do about it. So we can just read the headlines today. Same here, only the headlines are enough. Here, this article discusses about how the upcoming pact with the UAE, the free trade agreement with the UAE, would help the jewelry exports from India. When the agreement would be signed, currently the jewelry imported from India to UAE, it would be charged at 5%. Now when the agreement is signed, there would be 0% duty, because of which the Indians would nicely export to UAE. And even the imports from UAE to India, the rate would be reduced by 1%, and we would be able to import almost 120 tons of gold to further increase it to 150 tons of gold in 200 tons of gold in the coming 5 years. This will help in strengthening the business ties. But during the COVID, the business between the UAE and India reduced to almost $2.7 billion in the gems and jewelry segment. We have the potential to increase it to $10 billion in just the gems and jewelry segment. And now, because of the 0% import duty that is going to be there when the agreement is signed, when the agreement comes into force, we would be able to again go back to the $10 billion mark. These are the articles related to economy today. Thank you so much.